Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you all. This is your host, Amina Ahmed, and you're watching Muslim Network TV. Welcome back to another episode of NextGen on this week's theme of humanitarian crises that we are facing in our world today. We're there on Galaxy 19, satellite, MuslimNetwork.tv, Amazon Fire TV, Roku, and soon on Apple TV as well. Now, the crisis we'll be speaking on today is one that has been going on for multiple years now. It is a crisis that has even sought out US intervention. An article on Shadow Government was describing the necessity of US intervention in this crisis. This is the crisis of the Uyghurs in East Turkestan, a people from East Turkestan who are facing oppression in China currently. The Communist Party is carrying out a methodical campaign of oppression in an attempt to extinguish the religion and ethnicity and culture of the Uyghur people. Uyghurs are not free in the most fundamental sense of the word. They're not free to travel, to practice their faith, to speak with their relatives. They're not free to even name their children. Not even submission to discriminatory and government regulations and coercion keep their families safe from the Chinese Communist Party. Back in 2018, Human Rights Watch described the Chinese government's mass arbitrary concentration camps and detention centers, torture, forced political indoctrination, mass involuntary collection of biomedical data, DNA to voice samples, which is all being used to track innocent Uyghurs in China currently. There are women who are being forced to marry Han Chinese men. They're being raped and forcibly taken away from their children, who are being thrown into orphanages where they're taught to hate their religion and culture. This is an issue that has been brought to light in the past 1 to 2 years, but it's one that's been going on for far too long. It's an issue that we are bound to speak upon right now until it gets worse, right? This is a genocide that we're seeing right now. This is an ethnic cleansing that we're seeing. And this has affected many Uyghurs. I was talking to an Uyghur and he was telling me that, almost every single one of them have family members in these detention centers, have, people that they know in these prisons that, the Chinese Communist Party are throwing innocent Uyghurs into. And to discuss this further, we have with us Kamalturk Yalqun. Thank you, Kamalturk, for being with us today.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, Kamalturk is the General Secretary for Campaigning for Uyghurs and is a pharmaceutical researcher. Kamalturk, it is an honor for us, to have you. Even just that one sentence of that brief bio on you doesn't do justice to the work that you're doing for the people back home.
Thank you very much for having me for an interview today.
It's definitely our honor and pleasure to have you. Now, I was speaking on the fact that so many people, so many Uyghurs are familiar with people who are in these detention centers and just to put it simply, in these concentration camps. I know your father, Yalqun Rozi, a renowned Uyghur writer, was arrested back in 2016. Can you tell us about the story of your father?
So, yes, as you said, China has put, starting 2016, China has put several millions of Uyghurs into concentration camps and put them into jails. Among them is my father. My father is actually among the very first of those arrested by China since 2016. My father used to be an editor and a very renowned literary critic and a writer in East Turkestan. And back in 2002, Chinese government wanted to have a new set of Uyghur literature textbooks for Uyghur kids in Uyghur region. So they asked my father to be the chief editor of these new set of textbooks. And my father worked in this project for more than 10 years. And those textbooks has went through very strict government censorships before they were published. And every year before the school starts, it also went through very strict censorships, annual censorships. So after these textbooks had been used for more than 10 years, starting 2016, China suddenly changed its stance on the Uyghur culture and the Uyghurs in total, in general. So they suddenly decided to abolish Uyghur literature textbooks and Uyghur education altogether, to eradicate Uyghur language and their culture. So they just came up with this plan to just mark these textbooks as having some like serious ideological problems, and just arrested everyone that has took part in compiling these textbooks, and my father among them. And my father was sentenced to 15 years in prison after he was interrogated in an undisclosed location for more than a year. So until this day, we don't have any connection with my father. We don't know where he is at this point, and we don't know how his situation is. And this has been a like very general scheme that had been going on for the past 4 years for lots of Uyghurs around the globe.
The fact that you're so close to someone that has been affected by what's going on, to innocent Uyghurs there, and it also takes us back to the censorship that's being done by the Chinese Communist Party. How they completely censor the media, and we'll also be speaking on that later on in the interview. I think it's an appropriate time to bring on our next guest, Rida Ali.
Hi, how are you?
Good, alhamdulillah. It's such an honor for us to have you on our show today.
Yeah, so just to give a little bit of brief background, I'm not Uyghur, but so I got involved with the cause through like college activism. There's a lot of college students on my campus, and I go to NYU, so there's a lot of international students, and as well as Columbia's campus. So all of us and like students from Yale kind of came together, and we saw what was happening, and the reports that have come out recently, and we're more on like the activism side and like learning about how everything we're doing in this country is impacting, the Uyghur Muslims in China. So, yeah, that's kind of what we've been working on. We'll talk more about like the campaign as we like go into the talk show.
Yeah, and I know you've interned with the United Nations. You've also traveled to the West Bank. We spoke on Palestine actually yesterday, and you spoke on how that kind of impacted the way that you're fighting for those who are oppressed today. Tell me about your internship with the United Nations.
Yeah, so I think that my travels to Palestine taught me more than interning for like the United Nations, just because I think that especially like us being so privileged here in America, like we don't really see what's going on. And like, it was a great experience, but I think that going and seeing like the occupation and oppression firsthand, coming back, that's what motivated me more to learn more about Yemen, learn more about what's happening with the Uyghur Muslims. So, and that also plays into media, because people don't know what's actually going on in Palestine because of the role of the media. And it's the same thing that's happening with the Uyghur Muslims. So it definitely was really impactful. I think that also interning at the United Nations just taught me a lot about like diplomacy and, policy and resolutions, but going and seeing it firsthand really changed my life.
Yeah. And, before we get more into the depth of, how you talked about what the work that we're doing here in America or abroad in general affects those actually in these Uyghur communities, can we talk about the context of the situation? What has led up to the situation that we're seeing, the oppression that we're seeing of Uyghur Muslims? Because much of our audience may not have a background on, what's actually happening there and what has caused it to happen.
So East Turkestan has been land owned by Uyghurs since several thousand years, and it was occupied by Manchurian Empire at the end of 19th century, and since then it became an occupied land. And in 1930s and 1940s, East Turkestan strived to get to very brief independent phase, like they strived to build their own independent country called East Turkestan, and but at the end of 1940s, with the end of the Second World War, China just invaded East Turkestan and occupied this region. And since then, China called this region as Xinjiang. It means new territory. So the name of East Turkestan, the official name of East Turkestan, which is called Xinjiang by Chinese, it actually means it's an occupied region, a recently occupied region, because that name, it translates into new territory. And we Uyghurs call it East Turkestan because we seek our like historical links. But after the occupying of East Turkestan by China, China tried to assimilate East Turkestan Uyghur population into their own like culture, but they were not very successful by doing this because Uyghur culture is mostly Islamic culture, and the Chinese culture is other types of Oriental, like Eastern culture, and they are not similar, and there is no attraction of Uyghur people. Just generally didn't attract to Chinese culture, and they just wanted to keep their own culture, their own language, and their own way of life. And being a government being an atheist government, China also wants to eradicate the religion aspects of Uyghur life, and the Uyghurs are almost 100% Muslim population. So everything that China strives to achieve, cultural assimilation, language assimilation, and religious eradication, they didn't play well with the way of life of Uyghurs. So this tension had built up for several decades, and in the year of 2009, there was a movement in East Turkestan that Uyghurs took to the streets. It's very similar to the current Black Lives Matter movement in the United States, and the Uyghurs demanded justice, equality, and freedom of speech from the Chinese government. But unlike what's happening in the United States, because at least in the United States, although there are some although the progression has been slow, but there is a progression towards like eradicating injustice, racial injustice, systemic racial injustice. But in China, China just labeled all those people that went to the streets as terrorists, violent terrorists, and just killed them and jailed like several thousand Uyghurs after this. And after this event, China's attitude towards Uyghur region started to change. They wanted to completely eradicate Uyghurs instead of just assimilating them slowly. China wanted to eradicate Uyghurs as soon as possible to gain total control over this occupied region of East Turkestan. So starting 2016, with the arrival of this new party secretary called Chen Chuanguo to the Xinjiang region, China started its cultural, its genocide campaign, and they started it with the cultural genocide, and that's why my father was among the very first of those arrested. And after, the full-scale genocide started to unfold starting the beginning of 2017, and China built many concentration camps and put several million Uyghurs into concentration camps, and they demolished several thousand mosques across the East Turkestan, and abolished Uyghur language education. And anyone that tries to identify themselves as a proud Uyghur was labeled as like radicals. Anyone that performs daily Islamic activities like praying or going to mosques or just wearing hijab, all of those activities are marked as Islamic radicalism. The daily routine of like normal Muslim is labeled as Islamic radicalism in China, and they just started to arrest like lots of people, and it just evolved into the current situation.
Kamalturk, we're definitely seeing, like you said, a cultural genocide that's going on in China right now against the Uyghur population. But Rida, I want to, kind of target this question toward you. We've been seeing a lot of efforts abroad to kind of stand in solidarity with the Muslims over there. Talk about some of that organizational effort that we're seeing, particularly in the United States.
Yeah.
Sorry. I just jumped in. It's not just a cultural genocide, but it is a genocide. But it started with a cultural genocide.
Okay.
Make a comment. So, sorry.
No,
yeah. So Kamalturk, feel free to jump in anytime you want. It's totally fine. Like just with all the efforts that we've been kind of like putting together, I think it's really important, like number one, to really educate ourselves on what's happening, because the parallels are so crazy. Like Kamalturk said, it's those same tactics that are used time and time again, and we still fall for them. And like this idea of getting rid of religious extremism, like where have we seen that before, And it's really important to like look into what's happening and understand like why people are, falling into it as outsiders. And so when we're doing like community organizing and activism around this whole Uyghur movement, we're trying to see how our daily actions are impacting like, you know, the people abroad. And so what we've done is we've kind of looked into and looked at the reports that have come out. There was a report that was released earlier this year about all of the companies that are complicit in forced Uyghur labor. And so like Nike, Adidas, like all of these companies that, you know, so many people, you know, buy from, and they're so popular, like they're very, they're complicit in Uyghur labor, and nobody realized until this report came out. So just like efforts that we've been trying to put together is to spread awareness about what's going on in ways that, you know, people like me and you and like people who use social media can, you know, be active in. So we've kind of just told everybody, if you own, look through these products, everybody owns, I'm on my MacBook right now, everybody owns an Apple product, people own Nike. So we've been telling everybody to, you know, use a standard caption that educates like people on what's going on. And I wore the sweatshirt for this specific purpose. If you're wearing like a Nike sweatshirt, you would write "Free Uyghur" on it and then post a picture in it and like hashtag it and post on. So we're resuming the movement this week, and that's kind of just how we've been trying to, you know, spread awareness. But so many accounts have, you know, created all these different like challenges, tags, articles, petitions. And also, like a lot of universities are offering scholarships to, or trying to offer scholarships to Uyghur students. There's like classes that you can take in the language as well. So just like these small efforts to help people here as well, you know, are very important.
Yeah, we'll be speaking more on the particular human rights violations going on against the Uyghur population, as well as efforts that are being done abroad to help and aid. Thank you for watching us, and we'll be right back after our short break. Welcome back to NextGen. We're here with Rida Ali and Kamalturk Yalqun. I want to ask both of you, right? This is a genocide or an ethnic cleansing, like you've said, that's been going on for years now. But why is it that now, just in the past 1 to 2 years, that we're seeing mainstream media kind of cover what's going on? Why isn't that we've, you know, why didn't we see this coverage before?
So the genocide campaign against Uyghurs had been going since the very first day of the occupation of East Turkestan by Chinese government. But the previous campaigns are kind of more subtle in their way of carrying out the genocide, and that they are trying to, the Chinese government were trying to slowly assimilate the entire population instead of just eradicating them. And although there were several very horrendous like ethnic cleansing activities carried out in some towns and the villages in East Turkestan during the past 50, 60 years. But since East Turkestan is such a tightly controlled region that has like very strict government censorship on every activities of the of humans, the foreign media is not is seldomly allowed to visit East Turkestan to have any like meaningful news out of the horrible situation of East Turkestan. And the Chinese media are entirely in the grip of Chinese Communist Party, which like censors every news, and every news that came out of East Turkestan should always be like pleasant and the happy farmers and stuff like that. So there had not been much international like attention towards the miserable situation of East Turkestan for the past several decades. And but starting in 2016, as I said before, China decided just to eradicate, just to be away with Uyghur people to gain the total control of the East Turkestan as soon as possible. They changed their previous policy of like slow assimilation, and they just changed, like turned full gear onto like just ethnic cleansing, like clearing this land from Uyghurs, and they started to carry out like large scale like ethnic genocidal activities in the Uyghur region. And this type of large scale activities in this age of internet and communication, although China tried to like turn the Uyghur region into an information black hole, although it's very hard for anyone to get any meaningful news out of there, but there are still very brave reporters that went to East Turkestan with some other excuses and recorded what's happening there and showed it to the world. And there are some leaked government documents about how to carry out a genocide against Uyghurs that also played a role on like documenting what's going on in East Turkestan. So although the previous efforts of Chinese government had been successful in the age of like prior to the age of internet, but with the accommodation of the internet over world, it's getting harder and harder for China to control the information. And with such a large scale of horrendous activities, it's also very hard for China to cover up every aspect of their actions. So that's why we are gaining more and more media coverage during the past 2 years.
And also, China seems to have a history of, this repressive nature against, in terms of the media. So why do you think its Western counterparts are allowing China to get away with this?
So this kind of global complicity, it's not only the Western counterparts, but like it's kind of every country in the world is being complicit with China's certain actions. And the only and main reason is the economic power of China, the trade relations, and the money talks in this relationship. And China just controls and infiltrates other countries' governments and the media through their economic power, and giving their pressures to like not cover too many like negative news about China. And Western media had been kind of complicit in this way, although they from time to time they show some kind of like very important news, but most of the times they had been complicit on the smaller scale human rights violations in China, and by not covering them. And also the Muslim Islamic countries in the world, they also have very tight economic relationship with China because of the geographical because they are all like kind of geographically closer to China than other Western countries, and they also want to have this economic strong relationship. Just last year, the Crown Prince of Saudi, when he visited China, he said he actually like applauded China for what it was doing against Uyghurs. So that is the type of the stance Islamic governments are taking against Chinese genocide on Uyghurs. Although the Muslim population around the world are very compassionate and they have empathy towards what's going on against Uyghurs, but the governments themselves, out of these economic relationships, they are just trying to be as complicit as possible in their dealings with China.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, just like really quick, like the facts about the Muslim countries not saying anything, Pakistan and Saudi Arabia both signed off on a letter that was applauding China for like its brilliant like efforts to counter like violent extremism. And that just shows that this isn't new. Like with Yemen, the same thing. Like a lot of Muslim countries don't speak out of the top because of the ties that they have to, countries that are bringing economic benefit to them. So it's up to us as people who aren't, we're not a part of like these governments, and like we're just sitting here, but it's important to spread awareness through like other platforms and through these new like platforms of social media.
Yeah, and can we speak about, the specific human rights violations? I want our audience to hear exactly what is going on. to the Uyghur population. Can we speak about those human rights violations that are being perpetuated?
So starting 2017, China built this large-scale concentration camps that could fit several thousand to tens of thousands of people in one camp, and they built this type of camps all across East Turkestan, several hundred of them. So the Uyghur population that were locked in these concentration camps by arbitrary detention is up more than a million. Some estimates it to be up to 3 million or 4 million. The very reserved estimates are at 1 million. So in these camps, there are some survivors of these concentration camps who are fortunate enough to come out of these camps and escape to other countries like Turkey or United States or Kazakhstan. So they gave their testimonies of what's going on in those camps, and those testimonies are very heartbreaking. They are denied the most basic human rights in those camps, like sleep deprivation, and hunger, and all types of physical torture carried out by Chinese government, and the gang rape against Uyghur girls in the concentration camps by Chinese police, and the forced sterilization of Uyghur women. Just several days ago, there was a report came out from victims of communism, an organization. In the report, they confirmed that the forced sterilization against Uyghur women and Uyghur girls are carried out across East Turkestan, across the East Turkestan, which is kind of like the exact definition of genocide if you look at the Genocide Convention of the United Nations. So there are also many other very horrible actions carried out on the daily actions of Uyghur Muslims. They are denied any type of religious activity. Any type of normal religious activities are marked as religious extremism. So if you are wearing a hijab, you are a religious extremist. If you say assalamu alaikum when you meet your friend, you are a religious extremist. If you don't smoke, you are a religious extremist. If you quit drinking, it doesn't matter whether you did it because you are a pious Muslim or whether you just wanted to quit drinking to become more healthy. As long as you have quit drinking several years ago, or you are marked as a religious extremist. So and you will be taken into concentration camps, and the people are forced to consume pork to show that they are not religious extremists. During the months of Ramadan, there were state-sponsored contests to gather a village population together to let the women among the population to drink during the month of Ramadan, drink beers and alcohol, to have this type of contests among themselves and broadcast them, pork feasts. The village population are asked to have pork feasts together to show that they are not religious extremists, and such are the human rights violations carried out to East Turkestan Muslims. And we not to mention other other oppressions like culture and language. So there it will take too long for me to go through these oppressions one by one. So I'll just stop here.
Yeah, Rida, would you like to kind of add on to some of those?
Yeah, so the one thing that I actually read a couple days ago and was looking up was what he was talking about with the sterilization of women, and the violence against women who have recently a report came out that kind of blew up, or it was an article, and I was just really shocked because Kamalturk, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of things that are happening, we might not even know what's going on because it's not being reported, and with all the reports that I've read, there's things that have happened and people didn't realize that it was happening until it was written about. So there's so many things that are going on in these camps, even just the countering to Islam and the identity aspect. The more that I read, the more new things I find. So we don't even know what's going on because of the fact that of the censorship. So it's really crazy, and the more it comes out, the more terrifying and horrible it is to read because we've seen these signs before and yet we choose to ignore them.
Yeah, and there has to be solutions to this, right? This can't be the end, end all. We have to have actual viable things that we can do, action items that can take place, that we can do from across the world as well. And we'll be speaking more on those action items. We're here with Kamalturk and Rida Ali, and we'll be right back after our short break. You're watching us on Galaxy 19 satellite, Amazon Fire TV, Roku, and soon on Apple TV as well. We'll be right back. Welcome back to NextGen. We're here with Rida and Kamalturk speaking on the human rights violations that are being perpetuated against innocent Uyghur Muslims. Now, I want to kind of ask both of you, we see this continuous pattern of majority groups oppressing the minority groups in their country. What do you think needs to change so that we don't see this continuous pattern? How can we create platforms to celebrate, acknowledge, and appreciate those who are different than us?
Yeah, so Kamalturk, feel free to jump in just because you know more about the region. But just in general, from the minority majority dynamics that I've seen throughout my whole life, living as a Shia Muslim in majority Sunni communities, and also traveling to Palestine, and then also being able to go to Pakistan as a kid and have to suffer through those religious dynamics as well. I think that it's very important for us to understand how majority and minority dynamics work and how oppression works. And there's this quote that I always refer back to by Hussein ibn Ali. It's, if you are silent when others are oppressed, then you are guilty of oppression yourself. So I think that it's really important when we're in these areas to take in, and when we're doing these campaigns, to understand and take in what's going on and make sure that we're just as outraged, even if it doesn't affect us. Because, when we're Yemeni, we're outraged about Yemen, but we're not as outraged about everything else that's going on in the world. So, I might not be a Uyghur Muslim, but then when I found out about all of this, I tried to think back to those moments when I was, in Palestine, or tried to think back to my identity as a Shia Muslim and, understand that I should be just as outraged, even if my identity isn't the one that's being affected right now. So.
China clearly is not a safe place for Uyghur Muslims. What is, some solutions to this issue? What can we do to stand in solidarity with, the Uyghur Muslims and the situation that they're in right now?
So not only China is not a safe place for Uyghurs nowadays, but China is trying to make the entire planet unsafe for Uyghurs. One example is in 2017, there are several dozen of Uyghur students studying in Al-Azhar University in Egypt. They were arrested by the Egyptian police under the request of China and sent back to China, and they were disappeared since. And just last year, we heard that Turkish government also did something similar to some Uyghurs living in Turkey. And there are several. There are Canadian Uyghur citizen who visited Central Asian countries, and he was also sent back to China by those countries. And some Australian citizens, or the families of those Australian Uyghur citizens who are visiting Xinjiang, the East Turkestan, they were also held by China as hostages, and they were not allowed to leave the country. Some of them sent to some of them just disappeared. So no matter the nationality, no matter from which country are those Uyghurs, no matter the citizenship status of those Uyghurs, China is just trying to arrest and eradicate as many Uyghurs as possible. And the remaining that they cannot arrest, they are sending threats to them through online messages, or the directed calls to their cell phones and sending them threat messages. So the entire planet, China is just trying to make the entire planet unsafe for Uyghurs. And in this situation, as I said before, because of their very strong economic relationship with China, most of the countries just trying to be as silent as possible, or to the point of complicity in this point. And I think at this point, what we could do is to have a global scale human rights movement among Muslim population, among all those peoples that that supports human rights, to pressure their governments to take a stance against China on these horrendous crimes. And by pressuring their own governments, they can also bring reforms to their daily lives, because those governments, by being complicit to China, they are also having learning new ways of oppression from China towards their own people. So by taking a hard stance against China, to ask their own governments to take a stance against China, people can actually not only help Uyghurs to survive, but also help to improve their own lives, quality of lives, I think.
Just to ask, following the recent efforts and the recent publicity around what has been going on, it's true that the U.S. imposed travel restrictions on officials that were involved in the detainment of Uyghur Muslims, right, Kamalturk?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that just proves to the point that a lot of people have been calling in, and a lot of people have been trying to bring awareness to this issue. So even small things like that can affect policy, like sanctions and travel restrictions as well. So that's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, and Rida, what are some resources that are available? I know that you spoke on the importance of educating ourselves and educating our peers. For people who do want to educate themselves on the situation, that's happening to Uyghurs, can you tell us about the resources available?
Yeah, so I myself was doing a little bit of activism around the issue this past year in college, and then when we got home, a couple of students from Yale reached out and they created this campaign, and I got in on it, and it was basically just to spread more awareness, because we're all sitting at home and right now everything is virtual. So I was like, this is the perfect time to join something like this and understand more about what's going on. And basically what we've been doing, if you want to follow the account, it's at Free Uyghur Now, and they've been posting pictures of everybody talking about the brands that they own, and then a personal statement about how this relates to them. And we've been posting infographics, and there's a lot of accounts that kind of have been created to serve this purpose as well. Especially if you're a college student or if you're a part of a larger organization, it's really important when it comes to activism, even with things like Black Lives Matter, to ask yourself, what is the institution that I'm a part of doing for this cause? Are they contributing to it, or are they sort of trying to find a solution? So pressure your universities. A lot of universities are now offering these courses on Uyghur language, and they're offering these 1-credit courses on the Black Lives Matter movement and things that are happening. And you should pressure the institution that you're a part of to kind of provide more resources as well. So that's kind of just about the campaign, and kind of just how if you're just sitting at home right now, how you could help. Kamalturk, feel free to jump in on more of a global scale. We talked about the travel restriction, but if you have anything else that could push these types of initiatives.
So the Chinese government, China's power comes from its money, and that's why there are so many countries willing to be complicit just to have a strong economic relationship with China. So if we could find a way to hurt China's economy for what they are doing on Uyghurs, like international sanctions, or by boycotting Chinese products that are produced by forced labor, or that are produced in concentration camps. Just recently, United States, just several days ago, United States Customs found out there are 13 tons of human hair from the Uyghur region. The female hair came to the United States as those wigs. So 13 tons of human hair are coming from the Uyghur girls and females in East Turkestan that are languishing in concentration camps. So China are forcing these people to work for free to make clothes and make shoes and make all types of products. So by boycotting these types of products, by also pressuring those companies that are willingly buying these cheap Chinese forced labor products, we can achieve, we can hurt Chinese economy in some ways. And unless China's economy hurt to the point of their benefit by gaining their benefit by gained benefit by killing Uyghurs and locking up Uyghurs and putting them in concentration camps are outweighed by the economic sanctions that China is receiving these days. Otherwise, we cannot turn the wheels of China's policy. So I think the most effective way to counter China with is by hurting them economically. And that's where the Chinese power come from. Because there is no cultural attraction or soft power that China possesses to attract the world population. The only thing that China has is their money, and if we can hurt their money bags, we can win this fight.
Yeah, and let it be known that it has been proved to be successful because following all of these movements, Lacoste pulled out of its forced Uyghur labor as well. So it's proven to be efficient and work. So we just have to keep doing it.
Yes, and I don't think so. Some people may think when we say boycott Chinese products, they might think it's kind of having an anti-Chinese flavor in it or something. But when we are saying boycott Chinese products, we are saying just make China listen to our demands of not using forced labor, not carrying out genocide against these Muslim populations, these vulnerable populations. So we should hurt them in some ways. And since we cannot just have total war with China, we have to have some way of hurting them. And economics is the most important way, most efficient way to hurt China. So by boycotting Chinese products and by spreading those news media coverage of those horrendous activities carrying out by China towards Uyghurs, we can have this international influence against China to make them stop what they are doing.
Certainly, we need to be hurting China economically, like you said, by boycotting some of the products. I know Rida has a list of, some companies that we can boycott as well. Before we leave this conversation, it has been extremely educating and enlightening, I think, for myself and especially for the audience that has been listening in. But before we end, I want to ask you guys just one piece of advice or just something you want to leave our audience with. Is there anything that you would like to say to that?
So I just want our audience to have a look when they're buying products. If there is a not made in China alternative, please go with that. And if there is if you see a news on Twitter or Facebook or other social media on Instagram that exposes China's crimes, please help to share and let our voice be heard.
Yeah, along those same lines, just with everything that's going on, we are truly in a time of all of our decisions have an impact. So everything you buy as a consumer has an impact. Everything you share on social media has an impact, even if you don't think it does. So along those lines, make sure that you're thinking about every action that you're making consciously. And if you check out those list of brands, I bet all of us are buying from those brands and we've shopped from them. And it's so easy to take out 30 minutes and try to find an alternative and just think about what's happening and really look into these human rights violations. But yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Kamalturk Yalqun and Rida Ali for being on our show today, for speaking your truth. And thank you for both of you. You are raising your voice. You're attempting to attain justice for innocent Uyghurs. And thank you for our audience for tuning in today on our episode of NextGen. And until next week on a new theme with a new guest, Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you all.